Hi, I'm Sandeep, and you're watching the Indian Weekender. As you all know, that right now we are in the middle of election season, with intense politicking happening around the country in whatever way possible in the current environment of different alert levels in the country. We are told that this election is going to be incredibly important as we are in the middle of a raging global pandemic and a rising financial debt which is accompanied with job losses and business failures. So, which government will be the most suitable government to lead us through in the future? What does this politicking mean for our Kiwi Indian and the wider ethnic migrant minority voters? Are we having a clearer understanding about how each political party has been performing lately, what they are promising for the future? To understand this better, we have actually tried to pull together a Kiwi Indian debate by getting one Kiwi Indian MP, Dr. Parmjeet Parmar from National Party, and another MP who is probably not exactly Kiwi Indian, but he is one of the most supporter of the Kiwi Indian community and very fondly known and well known in the Kiwi Indian community, Michael Wood from Labour Party, join us today and discuss what their respective political parties are promising to offer in the coming elections. So, welcome to this panel discussion, Michael and Dr. Parmjeet. How are you today?
Oh, look, very good. Thank you, Sandeep. Nice to be here in Oscar about the community. I'm going well, thank you.
Perfect. Dr. Parmar.
Thank you so much.
Great. Okay. So before we start, just wanting to quickly explain the broad overview. I do understand that there will be strong temptation, not only within our guest, but also from our viewers and readers to hear more about Roskill. So because both of you represent Roskill in Parliament, Michael is electorate MP there, and Dr. Parmar is a list MP based in Roskill. So what we are going to do is we are going to park that initial temptation for some time, and we will focus on the broader policy issues, what National and Labour is saying and offering to New Zealanders and also to the Kiwi Indian community, and we will come back and discuss about Roskill a bit later in the show. So starting with Michael, if I have to ask you to list down 4 major achievements of your government so far, so what would be they?
Oh, well, let me bring it down to only 4 because there are so many I could choose from. But the first one I would say is starting to make progress on dealing with the housing crisis that we inherited. So in the 2.5 years or so in which we've been in government, we've really begun to turn that round. We've now built over 3,000 new state houses. We have record levels of building consents happening in New Zealand. We've made changes that have done things like stopped offshore speculators from buying up New Zealand houses for profit. So that's a big ship to turn around, and there's still lots of work to be done, but we've made good progress there. Equally, we've made good progress in terms of supporting our education system. We've reinvested capital money into the property needs of every single public school in New Zealand, turning around a decade of neglect. Same in the health system, where we had hospitals like Middlemore Hospital with mould and rot in the walls when we came into government. And we've started a program of putting the resources in there so that everyone can have first-class medical care when they keep it. Fourthly, I would say, and this was one of the important achievements before COVID hit and really disrupted everything, is we've managed to get unemployment down to about the lowest level in the OECD at 3.9%, at the same time as lifting people's incomes. We were having record wage growth at that time as well. And that's one of the most important things we can deliver for Kiwi families.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Dr. Parmar, I would like to ask you that would you agree with the achievement, the list of achievement that Michael has listed out for Labour Party and the coalition government? Would you give credit to Labour Party on achieving what they say they have achieved?
We have seen that Labour Party is really good at making statements, broad statements, but when it comes to delivery, they cannot. We have seen this in this, this term of 3 years. Let me just touch on one thing which relates to ethnic communities here. In Labour Party's manifesto, they promised, this is their promise that they did in 2017 election, that they will start up a ministry for ethnic communities. This was a big promise made to ethnic communities and their hopes were raised. And so a lot of community organizations, ethnic community organizations, they thought, okay, that's a good idea. So they are going to support Labour. But we have seen last year, they dropped that idea of starting up a ministry for ethnic communities. Just like their Kiwi Belt, we have just heard about housing. We know what happened to Kiwi Belt, that big ambition of building 100,000 houses. I was talking to a resident in Mount Roskill, a young person who is at the moment renting and wanting to get into his first home. He said before last election, he thought that, yep, Labour's that policy of Kiwi Build was interesting, and he thought he was quite divided between national tax cuts, which we had already passed legislation for. That means that we couldn't do a U-turn, just like Labour has been doing U-turns on several policies. So he said that time he thought getting into his first home was more important, but now he's regretting because he said that he should have opted for tax cut, that the legislation was already passed by national. So, and then when you talk about light rail, which obviously was promised to the whole nation and especially in Mount Roskill as well. And because of that, we have seen the road and the roundabout, Denby roundabout, was not being repaired just because of that expectation that there is going to be a light rail going through that. So I had to fight for that roundabout to be repaired. So
Sure.
I
get
that Labour says. So yes, they are very good at making good big statements, but when it comes to delivery, Kiwi Build, Light Rail, and Ministry of Ethnic Communities, all gone within 3 years.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much for your comment on that, Dr. Parmar. Now, Michael, I would like to ask you that is it a fair charge against Labour Party and your government that it has been very ambitious and loud in making announcement, be it Kiwi Build or announcement on investment in health or city rail? What do you think? Have we been able to see the progress that you say you have made?
Well, we make no apologies for being ambitious about what we want to achieve for New Zealanders. And if you look at an area like housing, we inherited an absolute dog's breakfast, a complete housing crisis that had been let go over the previous 10 years. Now, have we been able to fix that in 3 years? Have we been able to do absolutely everything that we wanted? The answer to that is no, but we have made significant progress. Under the previous government, over 2,000 state houses were sold off. We've built 3,000 more. Kiwi Build hasn't gone as well as we wanted. And actually, we've been a government that's been prepared to be upfront and say, well, if something's not working, we'll own up to that, and then we'll look at how we can make it work better. But nonetheless, there are 500 young Kiwi families who are currently in a Kiwi Build house that wouldn't have had that opportunity before. Across every area, there is huge progress that we've made, whether it's housing, whether it's health, whether it's education, whether it's lifting family incomes. But look, there is always more to do. And that really is the message we're taking into this election, that we've made good progress, but we want to keep moving.
Well, I don't know, Michael, if you say that your ambitious goal in Kiwi Build was to build 10,000 houses in a year, and today we have got 500 houses, as you say, in probably 2.5 years. And do you reckon that's a reasonable good progress, and you are quite proud and satisfied with that progress?
Well, the overall progress in housing has been strong, as I've said. But I've also said that we were pretty clear that when Kiwi Build didn't go as we wanted, we're prepared to say that. Now, would you rather have a government that buries its head in the sand and says there's no problem, there's no housing crisis, which is what the previous national government did for 10 years? Or would you rather have a government that actually makes the investment and tries to actually improve the situation? Now, we have done that through Kiwi Build, not to the extent that we wish to, but we've retooled that. We have done that through building new state houses, and we have hundreds of new state houses right here in Mount Roskill. And we have Kiwi Build houses that will be opening up by early next year here in Mount Roskill and the Roskill South development.
Sure,
so across the board in housing, we've made that progress. Record consents in Auckland, new houses being built, and higher numbers of young couples being able to get into homes than we've had for about 20 years. So there's progress there, but I absolutely concede there's a lot more that needs to be done. That's what we want to do if we win government again.
Definitely, we get your point. And like you are high in ambitions, your party is high in ambition, and you want to achieve more. But another criticism, I will go and ask Dr. Parmar about that in a minute. But before that, Michael, my question to you is, do you think your government and your party has been able to develop some measuring indexes where you can measure the progress of the policies? So even if we park aside Kiwi Build for a minute, can we measure the progress what government has been able to achieve in, say, some other important policies, say bringing a child out of poverty? Have we got any indices over there where we can measure and evaluate what government has been able to achieve?
Yes, and that's a very important thing to do. So, for example, in the housing space, one of the problems with Kiwi Build was setting that big target at the beginning, and we said that actually wasn't the right way to go about it. What we've changed that to is a very simple dashboard, and you can log on to the government website. It's on MB's website, and you've got a dashboard about how we're going with our state house build, our Kiwi house build, and our other housing projects, and anyone can log on and see that. Same with child poverty. With child poverty, we actually changed the way we do our budgets. So now, under Labor, every time there's a budget, we don't just report on the surplus or deficit, we actually report on the progress that we're making against child wellbeing measures. And last year, we were able to improve 7 out of 9 of those. Again, an area where there's a huge amount more work to be done, but we've actually set in place clear measurements of the progress that we're making, because we believe that as a government, your job's not just about managing the finances, that's important. It's actually about lifting people's wellbeing and being able to measure that and make progress over time.
Sure. Now, Dr. Parmjeet, I know that you would have been waiting patiently to basically respond to what Michael has said. So I would like to ask you that not only Michael, but I think we hear it very often from Labour Party that they are trying to clear the mess left behind by National Party after their 3 successive terms. And that has probably stopped them from delivering what they have promised or offered to achieve in the 2017 campaign. So would you agree with that charge that come very often to National Party?
Actually, Sandeep, we were working hard and we were making good progress in so many different areas. The mess has been created by the current Labour government because they were not prepared to be in government. They didn't know that they are going to form this government, and all of a sudden they were in a position because New Zealand first decided to go with them and they formed this government. And you could see that in the House as well, in Parliament, when we were debating several legislations. Their senior ministers were rushing to the House to debate and to elongate that debate. Usually, the governments don't want that debate to be elongated. They really want the business to progress as fast as possible. But they were delaying everything in the House. And most of those legislations in the start were Labour legislations. Now, let me give you some examples of the mess that they have created. Just now, we have heard big explanation of state houses and how Labour government is doing so well. When we left office, there were around 6,000 people on the waiting list for state houses, and now there are 18,000, 3 times more, 18,000 people on the waiting list. So you can see who has created the mess. The second, about the child poverty, the issue that you raised, just a couple of days before, UNICEF's report came out, and I asked you to go and look at that report, and I asked Labour Party also to go and look at that report. We are at number 35 out of 41. We have become worse. Our ranking has become worse in that. There are so many people unemployed now. Just from 28th of August, if you see, 5,000 more people are on unemployment benefit. So how are you going to help people, children that are growing in households that don't have jobs? They don't come out of poverty. Actually, they go back into poverty. That's what Labour is lacking to understand. And this is, when we talk about unemployment figures, it's not just about now because of COVID. Even before that, we have seen the GDP growth was dropping under them. So COVID has become an excuse for them at the moment. So the mess has been actually created by Labour, which we will have to clear when we form the next government.
Michael, would you agree with what Dr. Parmar is asserting?
Oh, well, it won't surprise you to know that I have some slightly different perspectives on that. So your opening comment, I think, is an accurate one, that there was a big mess there to clean up when Labour came into government. If we take, for example, the UNICEF Child Poverty Report that Ms. Parmar referred to, the thing about that report, which does reveal that we have a problem that as a country we need to deal with, the most up-to-date data that it used was from the beginning of 2018. So it hasn't actually captured any of the progress that we've made under this government. It was basically an account of where things were when Labour came into government. Some of the data was only up to 2015, I think, from that report. So there are these huge problems, these huge issues that we have to deal with. I'm not actually so much interested in pointing fingers at the other party. I'm interested in focusing on the solutions to them. So in the area of child poverty, we brought in a families package. We said that instead of tax cuts that went to people like Parmjeet and myself, it was better to put that money into the households of low and middle income families with children, because they're the people who really needed a lift to their incomes. So that's the kind of policy that we're focused on, helping small businesses. We've just made that announcement today as well, with some of their costs as well. So I'm interested in actually the solutions that we've got, and Labour's got a lot of those going into this election.
Sure, we get that. And talking about current policies, I'm pretty sure we would be discussing in a couple of more minutes. But before that, before we hit and we talk about COVID, which has actually disrupted our world like nothing seen probably in last couple of generations. I would rather go and discuss very quickly about immigration issues, which has affected our ethnic migrant communities, including Kiwi Indian communities, in a big way. So, Michael, my question to you is: do you think this government has handled immigration portfolio well? Especially, and we are focusing on first 2.5 years before COVID hit. Do you think this is what exactly you set out to achieve, and what you ended in that first 2.5 years of your tenure, when we were seeing, I would say, long queues of wait time for normal visa processing, be it partnership visa fiasco, be it skilled migrant category, and probably last but not the least, the changes brought about in the parent category visa, which basically disenfranchised probably a vast chunk of ethnic migrant immigrants from being able to bring their parents and join them here. So, do you think you're happy with what government has achieved in that first 2.5 years?
Well, look, let's start on that last one. That's probably a good place to begin. Of course, the parent category was actually frozen under the previous national government. What Labor has actually done has been to make some movement towards opening it up. Now, actually, I've been really clear as a Labor Party MP. I would like to see that opened up further. But we've had to work with other parties, and we got where we could. Keep your eyes out for further immigration policy announcements in that area coming up soon. But more broadly in immigration, you can take any 2 or 3 year period under any government. You always have policy challenges in immigration. It's one of those difficult areas. And I've been one of the first ones who have come forward as a local MP and said, look, in areas like the partnership visa area where there were problems, I've spoken up, and we've tried to work with immigration to make sure that they're doing a better job than they were doing on that area. So where there are problems, we've tried to fix them. But again, we did inherit some real challenges. So we had international education, for example, where there were very poor standards, lots of student exploitation going on, and we've had to put work in place to improve those standards and improve the reputation of that industry. Same across the sector generally. I think we had got into a bit of a trap in previous years, actually under governments of both stripes, where we had an immigration system that was funneling large numbers of people into pretty low income roles. And it actually wasn't particularly sustainable or offering particularly good pathways for migrants themselves. So we've been trying to retool the system to focus more on the skills and the contributions migrant workers can bring, to better match them up with different regions where those skills can be used so that they can make a meaningful contribution and settle here well. That work's still going, but I actually think we're making pretty good progress there. And as we go along, we'll try and make more progress on some of those tricky areas like partnership and like the parental visa as well.
Sure. Now, Dr. Parmjeet, would you agree with what Michael has asserted just now about the progress that they have made, and also about the problems they have inherited in that immigration space as well from last national government?
Isn't inherent any problem, and it's really good to see how the cover up has been done for the issues that have been created for migrant communities by the current Labour government. So Labour clearly was looking like they wanted to cut the number of people that are coming from overseas, and they formed coalition government with New Zealand First. New Zealand First has been always anti-migrant, and that is the stance we saw in these 3 years towards migrant communities. So talking about parent category, let me make this very clear that, yep, immigration policies are reviewed from time to time. That was put under review, but in the background, all those applications that were in were being processed. And we said that we will review and reopen that category. And then when Labour formed the government, because we managed to get 44% of the party vote, we were hoping that we will form the government and we'll work on that policy. Labour formed the government, and obviously there were obstructions from New Zealand First that kept being kept delayed, because first it was told to us that it will be first 6 months, then it was told to us that it will be the next year. So it took so long for Labour actually to come out with their policy, parent category policy. Partnership visa policy, clearly we saw Shane Jones, how he treated migrant communities, and especially people, those who have specific cultures of where a to-be wife and husband cannot live before they are married. And there, Shane Jones clearly said that he had a role in changing that policy. So I wrote to the Prime Minister, and the response that I got from the Prime Minister was that, yep, I've spoken to Indian community leaders, and Indian community leaders were asked to come to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister should have gone to these community leaders to speak to them rather than asking them to come to meet with her. And it was a very short notice. I spoke to several of them. They were complaining that it was such a short notice. and they were asked to go to see the Prime Minister. So when it is the time to ask for votes, then the Prime Minister goes to these community organizations. When it came to explaining the situation, why the Prime Minister sat in one of the offices and asked these community leaders to come to meet with her. And then she distanced herself from Shane Jones, saying that he's from a different party. But who is the Prime Minister? We don't have three Prime Ministers from three different parties. We have just one Prime Minister, and he is a very senior minister. So I had to call on that as well. So I was quite disappointed to see that stance, that when it comes to asking for votes, our communities, migrant communities, ethnic communities, they're used by the Labour Party. But when it comes to answering such questions or giving an explanation to such kind of stances from such ministers, then they try to distance themselves. So partnership has been a big issue, and I have spoken out in the House, and just recently I asked a question to Honorable Chris Parmar in the House as well, because these people should not be suffering the way they are suffering under the current Labour government.
Sure. So, Michael, would you agree, or would you agree with the charges that Dr. Parmjeet has made over here? Do you think Honorable Prime Minister could have handled the issue from emanating from your coalition partner, particularly in that partnership visa fiasco? Could it have been handled better way?
Oh, well, no, look, I think there's a bit of point scoring there, but just to describe actually the process that unfolded there, Immigration New Zealand made some interpretations of the instructions it had from government around partnership visas that were clearly not correct. And so members of parliament, such as myself, heard about this issue from many of our constituents and raised the issue with both the Minister and the Prime Minister. I can actually tell you about the meeting with the Prime Minister because I organised it. And what actually happened there was that we invited a range of key community leaders within the Indian community to sit down and meet with the Prime Minister and to explain their concerns about how things were operating with the partnership visa. I think that's actually a good thing. That's actually how our politics in New Zealand should operate. When a problem comes up, we as government don't just sort of hide away in Wellington. We actually arrange to meet with community leaders to hear directly how it's affecting people and then to fix it, which we did. We went back and we made sure that Immigration New Zealand had clear instructions to go back to how they were assessing things beforehand, and that's dealt with the issue. It's actually an example of how good government could work. Mistakes happen under any government, national or Labour. It's often about how you deal with them and how you interact with the community. And I think we've actually had a really positive government that has engaged with the community, has fronted up.
Sure, definitely. I think our community has heard from both sides, and probably it's for them to make up their mind on this important and sensitive issue. And I also understand and acknowledge that there is an expectation on us to raise the issue about our forgotten generation. When I say forgotten generation, it is about temporary migrants who are stuck overseas and who are waiting for help from government to be let in and start their life. But we will talk about that in a moment. We need to move on and talk about COVID response, because I do understand that there is a lot of happening in that space. So, Michael, to start with, do you think what government has been able to achieve so far, are you satisfied with that in terms of managing COVID?
Well, look, New Zealand is in a very enviable position compared to pretty much any other country in the world. We've worked well together as a team of 5 million. We went hard and we went early. We made some really hard sacrifices at level 4 and level 3. And because of that, we've protected the health and the well-being of many, many New Zealanders. Other countries of a similar size to us have had hundreds or thousands of people dying of this terrible virus, and we've protected people's health and well-being through the leadership of Jacinda Ardern and the government, and the way in which the whole country has come together. And the key thing is that the best health response is also the best economic response. By actually getting on top of COVID and eliminating it, we give ourselves the best opportunity to recover and rebuild. So that's where we're wanting to get to now.
Sure. So does your government sincerely think that lockdown and border closures, they are the signs of success in managing COVID-19? Or would you have other plans as well?
Oh, well, lockdown and border closures are important parts of the response, but they're not the only parts of the response. And again, I'll just compare our record to pretty much any other country in the world. Just look across the Tasman at the moment. Look to India, look to the United Kingdom, look to the United States, look to Ireland, to actually see the difference that our response of going really hard quite early, getting on top of the virus and eliminating it before it really got into the community in a big way, that has saved the lives of many, many New Zealanders. So I stand by that, but it's not the only response. Managing the border well is important. We've made constant improvements there. After, and I'm sure you're going to get to this question, earlier on, it was clear that there were some areas that weren't quite being covered off there as well as they should have. There's no playbook for dealing with a global pandemic like this. And again, a good government will look at what's working well and look at what's not working well, and then it'll make improvements. And that's what we've consistently done as we've dealt with COVID-19. And frankly, the results speak for themselves.
Definitely. And before I go to Dr. Parmar, I just want to acknowledge that we are all aware of the criticism that the government has recently faced after the resurgence of second wave. So I will bypass that question, and rather I will ask Dr. Parmar that would it be fair to accept the charge on National Party that it is only very late that National Party has been able to gather their act together and come up with a responsible COVID response strategy?
The COVID response, it was in the hands of the government, how they dealt with it. So we were hit by COVID in February, which was quite late compared to other countries. So we are one of the later countries that was hit by COVID-19. So that should have actually prepared the government, because we were talking about this virus who could get into any country. And what this government did was they locked down the country, but didn't lock down the border. So the border was still open, but the country was locked down. So the strategy was completely wrong, and that is where the mess was created by this current Labour government. And obviously the virus got into our country. We have been a very lucky country. It's not about the strategy that we saw from the government. It's just because we have been a lucky country, because we are cut off from the rest of the world. People can come and only by sea or by air. It's not like people can drive into New Zealand. So those kind of comparisons, which are here again and again, those are not right kind of comparisons for New Zealand. So what happened first time? Yes, people sacrificed their work, their pay and everything. We were in the lockdown and we thought, okay, we are fine now, but now we have seen this resurgence of COVID-19 again, this big community outbreak, and a lot of people in Mount Roskill community are being found positive as well. It's because the government didn't control the border first time, and the government didn't put proper strategies in. Day 3 testing for people in quarantine was not happening. Frontline workers were not being tested. All these things have been exposed now. We want people before they board the flight to be tested, and day 3 testing should be there, and we want genomics done for every positive person so that we know where this outbreak is existing at the moment. And now the government is saying that, oh, the source is not known of the second outbreak, and they are downplaying that. In my view, they're downplaying because it works in their advantage. We definitely want to know what the source of the second outbreak is, because if we know the source of the second outbreak, then only we can go and control other outbreaks. So, making big statements again, they are really good at that. But when it's
Sure, no, I get your point. I will go and talk to Michael. Michael, would you agree with this charge that government probably was complicit in those 100 glorious days of when there was no community transmission in our country?
No, look, I think that whole response, to be honest, is incredibly dismissive of the incredible work that everyone in this country did. Just to say that we were sort of lucky. Actually, no, New Zealanders came together in an incredible way to battle this virus. It was the government, but it was also community leaders. It was people staying at home, making sacrifices, not going to work, not sending the kids to school, changing their lives to deal with this virus. So I think that's a very dismissive approach to the way that our team of 5 million came around this issue. In terms of the border controls, again, actually, what I just need to do is make a couple of corrections.
I will come back
to you. Actually, the government did actually close down our borders very quickly in the piece. At that time, we actually had National Party leaders saying we should open up to China and we should open up to other countries. We also had a National Party that voted against Labour's laws, which actually give us the ability to test people at the border. So as we've gone along with the border, there have been learnings, and it was very clear that earlier on there were some deficiencies there. We've been really clear about that. That's why Megan Woods came in. She brought in Air Commodore Digby Webb and the Defence Forces to make sure that we're as tight as possible at the border. This is a very, very tricky virus. You will sometimes have human error. There is nothing that is totally foolproof. The mark of a good government and the way it handles these things is that we keep on top of it. We keep looking at the new ways of dealing with it. We remedy deficiencies, and we do so quickly. And again, I would say, if you look at our testing and contact tracing, the way we've got on top of the second resurgence compared to places like Melbourne, we've actually been leading the world. So we'll keep working hard to keep COVID out, to keep people safe,
Sure.
and to
Get your point. Get your point,
That's
Michael.
our
Thanks for that. So, Dr. Parmar, probably you seems to be unhappy about few assertions, few points that Michael has made for the government. So, and also about Michael was saying, and probably it's for you to decide and revert if you wish to, about the lack of coherency in National's response or understanding. National was not very clear about opening or closing the borders, forming the trans-Tasman bubble, and we have seen many ups and downs over there. So, how would you defend that?
I think it is actually quite, I would say that undermining of the response that National has actually shown for COVID-19's management. So obviously I can see that where the member is coming from. And when we talk about the sacrifice of our people, New Zealanders, that has been actually ruined because of the second wave, which has come up because of incompetence of the current Labour government. So everybody sacrificed that and we expected that, yep, it is going to be all fine, but it wasn't fine because we found out later on day 3 testing wasn't happening. There was possibility of people that were positive that were in the community. So obviously this virus has come from somewhere and we still don't know the source of this second wave. And so the sacrifice that has been made by the community leaders, our 5 million people, has been undermined by the current Labour government. Now coming to the second point of border, you know, who did that dance? It was the Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern who did that dance that we are COVID-19 free. They have all that information, which we in opposition don't. So if we are COVID free, then why shouldn't we be opening borders in a careful manner? That was the strategy that National came up with. But obviously, when we found out there is a second wave because of mismanagement of this current government's, towards the overall COVID-19 situation, we have changed our stance because it is about what's happening in the community and we will respond accordingly. So if there was no that dance that the Prime Minister did celebrating that there is no COVID-19, maybe we would not have come up with that policy.
Sure. Well, again, we have reached to a stage where probably we'll have to leave the issue and let our voters decide on which line of argument they would like to buy. But I have a question to you, Michael, related to COVID. That if I say, God forbid, there is another wave of resurgence, if we have to see in the country, then does the government have a different plan, or we are going to stick with the same lockdown strategies?
One of the key things about the government's response to COVID right the way through is that we have made sure that we have based our response around the very best available public health advice. So through Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, the Ministry of Health, we've always taken their advice and responded in accordance to that. We've still had to be the decision makers and be accountable for that. We've taken that advice very, very seriously. So if we do have further resurgences, and those are possible, we've said that from the very beginning. This is a tricky virus, and in any country, it's possible that we will have further cases. We can minimise the chances, but it's possible. What we will do in the event that there are further resurgences is to take that public health advice, is to go hard, because we've got this elimination strategy, and that's different from other countries. Other countries have got a strategy of flattening the curve, sort of lowering the numbers. Ours is an elimination strategy, which actually says when it pops up, we stamp down on it and get rid of it as quickly as we can. So we'll follow the public health advice to do that. One of the good things that we've got now is we've got world-leading testing and contact tracing capacity, which we didn't have at the beginning of this thing. That gives us the capacity to go after the virus very quickly, find the people who are connected and isolate them. That possibly means that we don't have to have as stronger measures in terms of lockdowns in the future. But again, we will just basically take the public health advice and form a view based on that to keep New Zealanders safe.
Sure. Thank you very much, Michael. And as I said, that we will have to leave this issue here it is and move on to one of the most pressing issue that is affecting, I think, the broader Kiwi Indian community and the entire ethnic migrant community, the issue of our forgotten generation. When we say forgotten generation, we are talking about tens of thousands of temporary migrant workers who were ordinarily resident in this beautiful country and trying to make a life out here, in some cases for a decade, if not more. So around tens of thousands of those temporary migrant workers have been stranded overseas, and it has been more than 6 months. And let me acknowledge it very, very accurately that so far, both of the major parties, Labour and National parties, has probably been disappointing in their response, has not offered anything in concrete. So, Michael, my question to you is, in the coming months before election, or even after, if you are you come back to your government, do you think you will be coming up with a relief to let them inside the borders?
Well, look, it's a very, very difficult issue. And the first thing I will just do is just to express, my sympathies with how difficult this is for those people who have been caught outside of New Zealand at the time that the international borders closed. And it's a huge example of the way in which COVID has thrown billions of people's lives into the unknown over the last 6 months all around the world. Labor will have policy coming out in this area before the election. And I'm not in a position to announce that this evening, but we will have policy to give some clarity around how we plan to deal with this situation.
Well, I can take it as a big promise. I can take it as a big promise that
Don't
something
take it as a
good
big
is.
promise.
Mhm.
Take it as a commitment that we'll have a policy, but I won't oversell the fact that this is a very, very difficult issue to deal with. And I've tried to be really honest with people all the way along that
Well, surely.
any country will have as its first call getting its citizens back within its borders. Any country will do that. And that's the approach New Zealand has had to take as well. So
No,
we've had to set up
sure. Well, as I
regime around
said,
managed isolation and quarantine. We've had to have huge logistical
well, those are the
processes to do
questions.
that.
Those are the
Yeah.
questions that we are going to ask. Like, first, let me reflect you the sentiments of our stranded migrant workers who acknowledge the sympathy that you in the government and other ministers has been constantly sending them. They acknowledge that they get it. But what they are complaining about is that they have been patiently waiting for last 4, 5, or 6 months, and they are not seeing any ameliorative action. So that's the thing. We acknowledge that it is a complex problem, but we are not seeing any concrete action on the ground. So when I say action, like, is your government contemplating to increase the capacity of the current managed isolation and quarantine facilities to anyhow get some selected temporary migrants who are more urgently required for our farming sector and other important sectors to set the economy rolling as well? Are we working in any direction, or we are just hoping for COVID to disappear?
Well, as I say, we'll be announcing policy in this area quite soon. But I have to be clear, there is no easy fix. As you say, we have tens of thousands of people on temporary visas who are stuck offshore. We have tens of thousands of citizens, tens of thousands of people with residency status. It's not going to be quick to get everyone back in. And we've tried to give people the respect of being honest about that from the beginning. We do want to support people to come back as quickly as we can. But we've also tried to be clear that it's not going to be super quick. But we are
Great.
working on it. We'll have some policy that comes through soon that will give people a bit more certainty.
Sure. Now, my question is to Dr. Parmar. Dr. Parmar, National Party has been in opposition, but to be very honest, from what we are hearing, probably they are feeling being let down by National Party as well. Like, there has not been any clarity that how National Party would like to solve this issue, which is a complex issue.
First of all, I really feel for these people, those who are stuck overseas. It was just by chance that they traveled overseas and they are stuck there. Now, the next thing is that we are not in government, we are in opposition. And whatever we announce will be implemented only if we form government. And Labour is in government at the moment. They had the opportunity to look after these people that are stuck overseas, but they haven't. So I received hundreds of emails, from these people that are stuck overseas, pleading to be heard. And as the chair, I chaired the Education and Workforce Select Committee. There we received a petition as well, where a lot of these people that are stuck overseas wanted to be heard. So it was giving them the opportunity to be heard. Now, what we have, this is not our National Party policy. National Party policy will be announced, but I can tell you at personal level.
So you can promise that National Party is working to come up with a policy towards stranded temporary migrant workers?
The National Party will be coming up with the immigration policy, which will include all aspects of immigration. But what I can tell you at personal level is that I have definitely advocated for people, those who are partners of residents and citizens. And for migrant workers, we have always said that if their employers still support them, that will be something that we have in the past looked at, because we are the party that supports economy. We are the party that supports businesses. And if businesses need more people, if these people are needed from overseas, if they bring some special skills that are not available here, we have supported that in the past, not like the current Labour and New Zealand First coalition government, where it's all about numbers, how many people can come into our country. So us, we are about economy, we are about supporting business.
Sure, we get your National Party's view. But my next question to you is, Dr. Parmar, more as a Kiwi Indian MP. And that question is that are you lobbying strongly within your party at this important, crucial juncture for those temporary migrant workers who are stuck overseas and trying to influence, I would say, a spokesperson for immigration to come up with a relief for this important section?
So we are the party, and also myself, I really believe in making sure that we are able to unlock the benefits that we can get from immigration policies. It's about supporting our economy, it's about supporting our country, it's about supporting our businesses. So, there are so many cases that I am working on case by case basis where people are really stuck. They have come to the point where they're thinking of closing down their business because they're not able to get the skilled person who is stuck overseas. These kind of things are happening on case by case basis, but obviously I cannot say anything on behalf of the party. That is the role of the leader to come up and announce the policy.
So, are you aware that National Party is working for an immigration policy and that can come out very soon before elections?
Sandeep, I can tell you that National Party is working on all sorts of policies. With COVID-19, our border policies are really important to us. We have been quite keen on making sure that our border is able to operate in a manner that is safe for New Zealand, is able to support our economy. But why I cannot give you a timeline, and I cannot give you when the leader is going to a date when the leader is going to make that announcement
Sure.
and what the announcement would be.
Sure, get your point. Thanks for that. So, again, we will have to move on from this issue and move on to another important issue, which is very important for all New Zealanders, the debate between managing the public health crisis that we are facing right now with COVID and also managing the economy. So, Michael, my question to you is now that we have managed the first wave and probably we are trying to get around the second wave of COVID as well in this country, do you think Labour Party and the coalition government is well prepared to look after our economy and unleash an economic progress which can help us in coming out of the huge debt that we have accumulated in the last few months?
Yeah, this is the question that a lot of people are thinking about at the moment. And the answer is yes. And a couple of key points that I'll just bring to bear on that. The first is that the very best thing we can do for our economy is to have a strong public health response. The biggest risk to our economy is that if we let COVID rip through our country in big numbers, we let it get loose and we don't get on top of it, then we end up like Melbourne and our economy is completely frozen up, not just for weeks potentially, but for months or a year or even more. So the work that we have done as a country and as a government to get COVID under control is one of the best things that we can do for the economy. The second thing is that within that, we've been a government which has been incredibly active in terms of trying to cushion the blow and support businesses to get through what is a very, very difficult time for many. That's why the wage subsidy has been so important. The interest-free loans to small businesses, some of the tax changes we've made to give businesses some extra revenue to get through this period. All of those things have been helping people to get through. And then as we go forward, we've got a plan which we are rolling out now to get into the recovery and the rebuild phase. That's why things like the free apprenticeships and trades training are really important. Give young people skills so that they can be useful and productive and get back into the economy. That's why a lot of the ongoing support, like the small business package that we announced today, is going to help a lot of small businesses to get a bit of extra cash flow back into their businesses and to move forward. That's why the infrastructure projects we're rolling out, billions of dollars worth of infrastructure that will increase our country's productivity, but will also give thousands of Kiwi workers jobs as we go through this recovery and rebuild period. That's another important point.
Sure,
So there is
we
a
get that.
rolling out. We want to keep it moving.
Perfect. Now, Dr. Parmar, would you agree with the vision, the economic vision that Michael has just now shared on behalf of Labour Party? Do you think that is enough to help our economy grow and help people out of destitution that they're facing?
Sandeep, it's a well-known fact that Labour doesn't know how to manage economy. When it comes to fiscal management, they just don't know. It's all about borrowing and spending, and the spending is also in a very untargeted manner, as we have seen with the Green School, about $12 million given to this school only to keep a coalition partner happy, the Green Party happy there. So that wasn't going to benefit anybody. So when we talk about economy, we have to support our businesses. Wage subsidy is something that we supported in the start, but wage subsidy is not a long-term sustainable solution to support businesses. Businesses need cash flow. I agree with that, but businesses don't need loans. because all these people already have some sort of loan because we are a small country. Most of our businesses are small businesses. You don't want to put another loan on these businesses. They need other kind of support that national did at the care. And also these businesses now to grow, they won't be able to employ more people, which is really important for any business. That's why we have announced Job Start, and we have also announced Business Start. Job Start is for people those who would like to employ another person. So this is a modification of flexi wage subsidy that was introduced by us previously, and we have modified that policy. This will be for 6 months so that it can create a long-term employment for this new person. Business Start is people those who will be laid off because of mismanagement of current Labour government. And if they wish to start a new business, they will be able to access the KiwiSaver fund. So this is a support for people to start up their own business because there are a lot of people, they have really good ideas. And then talking about borrowing, $140 billion, 80,000 kind of debt per year per household, someone will have to pay that back. And Labour is not coming clean on what kind of taxes they will put on people if they are in the position to form the next government. We want to know, people want to know now what those taxes will look like because government will need revenue. We have been quite clear that we will not increase taxes in the first term. We have also said that the Auckland Regional Fuel Tax, the light rail project is gone, but Auckland Regional Fuel Tax has not gone, which is adding to the cost of living. We have said that we will get rid of Auckland Regional Fuel Tax. So that is definitely going to make a lot of savings for
Sure,
our people.
we get that. So, Michael, would you agree with this charge on the economic credentials of Labour Party that we often hear time and again? Would you agree with that charge?
Well, just because you say something over and over again doesn't make it true. And the fact is that as we came into COVID, the economic record of this government was extremely strong, growth above our trading partners, record low unemployment, lower than it ever was under 9 years of national. And we'd managed to pay our debt down to below 20% of GDP. So we were very responsible in that respect. And that gave us the ability to borrow and invest as we've needed to help New Zealand get through this unprecedented global crisis. What we've actually done as a part of the response to COVID is we put aside a $50 billion investment fund to help New Zealand get through, to put into those infrastructure projects and the income support that businesses and workers have needed. But we've actually held back $15 billion of that. We had people saying, spend it now, spend it now. And we actually said that the responsible thing was to hold it back in case we needed further investment if there were further waves, or to be able to pay back debt later on. So we've made the investments that we've needed for New Zealanders through this, but we've also tried to do it responsibly. And I've just also got to say that the National Party's position on this stuff has been really inconsistent. That, of course, they're attacking us for supposedly racking up too much debt, but at the same time, they're also making further promises to spend things. And the fiscal plan that they've put forward would see about $80 billion of spending cuts in health, education, and those sorts of areas over 10 years to get the debt down to where they say it would get to. And that would devastate large parts of New Zealand society. So we're trying to be responsible and balanced about how we manage this situation.
But what I must say, Michael and Dr. Parmar, I think during this campaign, probably both of you parties have come out very smartly, basically confusing the voters, coming up with this charge of tax cut and new taxes versus spending cuts on the services. So I will ask Dr. Parmar. Dr. Parmar, what do you have to say about this Labour's countercharge on National Party for promising more than what they can deliver in terms of reducing the fiscal debt to GDP ratio, plus cutting down the spending in the services?
So that speaks here, because if you look at the GDP growth, we can see that even before COVID, GDP growth was declining under Labour. That is a clear indication of Labour not able to manage our economy. And the national GDP growth was around 4%, and before COVID, it had come down to around 2%. So the growth had already come to half what we were seeing under national. So that shows that Labour has failed to manage our economy. Now, talking about inconsistencies here, when we had global financial crisis, I can tell you that national borrowed too, and we support borrowing in such crisis, but we don't supporting the kind of funding that this government is doing, like the green school example I gave before, and the way the money is being scattered. So wage subsidy is good, but if you continue with wage subsidy, now we know the wage subsidy is going to come to an end. How many people are going to become unemployed? There is no sustainable approach to keep these people in employment. What we are saying is that yes, borrowing, but You have to borrow carefully, not the kind of borrowing we have seen under them, $140 billion. And whatever borrowing is done, that needs to be spent in a wise manner where we
Sure.
know it is going to actually benefit the community, not benefit just the Labour Party as they have held back, as he has admitted.
Definitely. I get your point, Dr. Parmar. Thanks for your valuable suggestion. I have to cut you off because I've been signaled that we are running short of time and we have to move very quickly to an important issue to both of you. As a representative of Roskill, Michael, you are elected MP there, and Dr. Parmar, you are list MP over there. So if I have to ask both of you, Michael first, what according to you are the two main local issues in Mount Roskill?
Oh, look, I've lived in Mount Roskill for 18 years. I know the people here well and love the place. A couple of big issues which come to mind. Firstly, is the issue of the recovery and the rebuild from COVID-19. Our community has been hit the same as other places have around the country. And so we need a government that's kind, that's inclusive, that actually wants to build a recovery that's around ensuring that people have got decent work, that they're paid well, and that they're included in our society. Second biggest issue, I would say, is what was the biggest issue last time, and that's the ongoing progress we've got to make to ensure that every Kiwi family's got a decent, warm, dry and affordable house. And I'm proud of the progress we've made here in Mount Roskill with hundreds of new homes.
Sure, I will have to stop you there and move on to Dr. Parmar. Dr. Parmar, what would be the two main local issues in Mount Roskill?
I think we have seen some really serious incidents. Just earlier this year, there were 2 gun shooting incidents in the space of 3 days. So violent crime is going up really fast under current Labour government. And I want to see Mount Roskill that is safe for people. This is out in the street, in their homes. And I am connected to Mount Roskill from last 25 years, and I understand Mount Roskill communities and their aspirations. And crime is definitely one of the issues that is a very important issue for Mount Roskill communities. The second issue I would like to talk about is drugs is definitely another concern, because I get a lot of families walking into my office with those kind of concerns. And cannabis, legalizing recreational cannabis, which Labour is supporting and the Labour candidate there is supporting, I'm opposing that as a scientist, because I understand what the consequences are going to be of legalizing this.
Sure, I get your point. Dr. Parmar, you made a very, I would say, reference to your 25 years of connection with Roskill. On that note, I'm tempted to ask that, is it correct that recently you've applied within National Party to represent the new electorate of Takanini? Is that correct news, or is just a...
Within the party, I have been associated not just at the party level, but at the personal level with Mount Roskill electorate. Some people may not know I owned a business which was in Mount Roskill electorate a few years ago. So my connections are quite deep in the Mount Roskill community. And obviously the border has changed. So now I have more families that I'm connected to in the Mount Roskill electorate.
Sure. So talking about border, and this is an open question to both of you, like who do you think, which party is going to benefit more with this border changes in the Mount Roskill electorate? Who wants to answer first?
Actually, just to finish the question that you asked me before, people should be aware that our Labour candidate, he stood in Botany, he stood in Pakuranga, he stood in Epsom. So these things are really important for people to know. Just because now he's in Mount Roskill doesn't mean that, that
sure.
kind of advantage. So it's not about where you live, it's about what you do for the community.
Get your point. Definitely get your point. Now, can we come back to the last question, that who do you think is going to benefit from the recent boundary changes in the Mount Roskill electorate?
Oh, look, that's up to the voters. I don't take anything for granted, and how people vote in different parts of the electorate, I'll be working hard to win their votes.
I get your point, Michael.
Cindy, I've lived in this electorate for 18 years, unlike my opponent.
Fair enough. I get that point, and that's why we don't want to continue a lot on Roskill. I do understand there is a huge temptation. I acknowledge that, but I do note that Michael's answer is quite politically correct. Dr. Parmar, would you want to take a slightly different approach?
It's quite good to see, how people take up the opportunity, being opportunist. I'm not one of those. Let me say this, that I'm really actually sad to see that part of Mount Roskill that is towards Royal Oak that is now gone out from Mount Roskill, because I worked really hard with that community. I even had a legislation in Parliament to support one of the Auckland regional amenities, which is Stardome Observatory, which has passed. So I worked with all communities in Mount Roskill. So now the new part which is added, obviously we will be talking to all people. It will be up to voters what they decide, but voters can definitely see who is working hard for the area.
Great, great. I will leave it for voters and audience out there to judge how actually you both of you answered on that particular last question. But what I would appreciate sincerely is thanks for sharing your time today. Thanks for sharing your passionate views about your respective political parties and what you want to do, both nationally and for the broader community, and of course for your local Mount Roskill electorate. So thank you very much. We will leave the discussion over here itself, and I must say that we had a very, very rigorous discussion. Probably we touched upon most of the issues that are affecting the broader Kiwi Indian community along with the rest of New Zealanders. There has been some promises, I would say, or if not promises, probably assurances made for a very important policy that could be coming very soon related to immigration, where we can see some relief coming from possibly from both parties, but that is an area that we need to watch. But I do just want to thank both Michael Wood and Dr. Parmar for sharing your time and joining us here in this panel discussion. Thank you very much. You have a good night.
Thank you. Good.